She was known only as the Ghost, among the most elite warriors in the world, a legend whispered about in hushed tones by Navy SEALs, who'd survived impossible situations against all odds. A shadow figure with uncanny combat instincts who appeared when all hope seemed lost, but only for those she deemed worthy. Commander Rachel Westbrook had dismissed these stories as battlefield mythology until the night in Fallujah when she looked death in the eye and saw a woman standing between her and oblivion. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty forward operating base as Commander Rachel Westbrook studied the satellite images spread across the makeshift table. At 43, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen the darkest corners of human conflict and emerged not just alive, but with her soul intact, something increasingly rare among special operators with her level of experience. 22 years in Naval Special Warfare had etched fine lines around her eyes and threaded silver through her dark hair, which she kept regulation short and practical. The other operators called her Westy, a nickname that had followed her from her earliest days in BUDS training when she had been one of the first women to complete the brutally demanding SEAL qualification course. Now, as the commander of a specialized SEAL unit tasked with the most sensitive operations, she had earned something far more valuable than a nickname: unquestioning respect. Rachel traced her finger along the route they would take that night, a high-risk extraction of an intelligence asset from a heavily guarded compound in territory controlled by insurgents, who had already proven their brutality with the executions of 3 American contractors. The mission parameters left almost no margin for error. "Sir, permission to speak freely?" Lieutenant Marcus Chen stood at attention, his young face betraying the concern his disciplined posture tried to hide. Rachel nodded, not looking up from the maps. "Always, Chen, you know that. The intel on this compound is 12 hours old. Satellite shows at least twice the activity we expected. And the weather." He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Sandstorms brewing. Visibility will be compromised. Maybe we should consider postponing." Rachel straightened, meeting the lieutenant's gaze. The rest of the team paused their preparations, watching the exchange. These men and women, her people, had followed her through hell more times than she cared to count. They deserved her honesty. "Assets cover is blown as of 0600 tomorrow. She's got intelligence on 3 planned attacks on civilian targets. If we don't get her out tonight, she dies, and so do potentially hundreds of innocents." Rachel's voice remained level, matter of fact. "So we adapt. We overcome. Like we always do." Shun nodded, his posture relaxing slightly. "Understood, Commander. Just wanted it on record." "Appreciated, Lieutenant." Rachel allowed the ghost of a smile to cross her face. "And if it makes you feel better, I've got a good feeling about this one." That was a lie, and they both knew it. In 17 years as an operator, Rachel had developed an almost supernatural sense for when missions were going sideways before they even began. Tonight, every instinct she possessed was screaming danger. But the mission parameters were clear, the stakes non-negotiable. Sometimes you walked knowingly into the fire because the alternative was unthinkable. As the team dispersed to continue preparations, Chief Petty Officer Mike Sullivan lingered, his weathered face unreadable beneath his salt and pepper beard. Sullivan had been with Rachel longer than anyone, her right hand through operations that remained classified at the highest levels. "You want to say something too, Chief?" Rachel asked, rolling up the maps with practiced precision. Sullivan shifted his weight, uncharacteristically hesitant. "You ever hear the stories about the ghost, Commander?" Rachel's hands stilled for just a moment before continuing their task. "The guardian angel fairy tale? Sure, who hasn't? Right up there with Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster." Thing is, Sullivan continued, his voice dropping, Taylor's unit swears they encountered her in that clusterfuck in Kandahar back in 19. Said she appeared out of nowhere, took down 6 tangos with impossible precision, then disappeared. No team affiliation, no extraction, just gone. Taylor also claims Elvis works at his local 7-Eleven. Rachel replied dryly, War zones breed stories, Chief, always have. Sullivan nodded, but his expression remained serious. Maybe, but I've been hearing these stories for 15 years now. Always the same description. Female operator, works alone, shows up when missions go critical. And the part that makes my skin crawl? She only helps the ones she deems worthy. Others she just watches fail. And what makes someone worthy in this ghost story? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Sullivan said quietly. Taylor said she spoke just once before vanishing. Sod, your reasons matter. Whatever the hell that means. Rachel zipped the case containing the operation plans with a decisive motion. Well, if our mysterious guardian angel shows up tonight, I'll be sure to ask for clarification. Until then, we stick to the plan and trust our training. Wheels up in 3 hours. Sullivan nodded, reading the dismissal in her tone. Yes, ma'am. As he walked away, Rachel allowed herself a moment of stillness. The ghost. She'd heard the whispers throughout her career, the mysterious female operator who appeared from nowhere during the most desperate situations, who fought with skills that defied explanation, who vanished as quickly as she came. Some said she was a deep-cover CIA asset. Others claimed she was the product of a classified military program, so secret even those at the highest levels of command didn't know about it. The more superstitious suggested something else entirely, that she wasn't quite human anymore, if she ever had been. Rachel didn't believe in ghosts or guardian angels. She believed in preparation, in skill honed through relentless training, in the unbreakable bonds forged between warriors who had bled together. That was real. That was tangible. That was what had kept her alive through engagements that should have ended her. Still, as she began her own pre-mission rituals, checking her weapons, reviewing the extraction protocols one final time, writing the letter she always wrote before high-risk operations, a strange unease settled over her. Not just the usual pre-mission tension, but something deeper, more primal. As if something was watching her from just beyond the edges of perception. 3 hours later, under the cover of darkness made even more complete by the approaching sandstorm, 2 Black Hawks lifted off from the fob, their silenced rotors barely audible above the rising wind. Rachel sat beside the door gunner, her eyes scanning the terrain below as it gave way from barren desert to the scattered lights of the city's outskirts. Her team, 8 operators handpicked for their specific skills, performed their final equipment checks with the practiced efficiency that came from countless operations. The mission was straightforward in concept, nightmarishly complex in execution. Infiltrate a 4-story building in a densely populated neighborhood. Locate and secure the asset. A local woman who had been providing critical intelligence on insurgent activities for the past 18 months, and extract her before her cover was irreparably blown. Complicating factors included at least 20 armed hostiles in the immediate vicinity, the looming sandstorm that would make extraction increasingly difficult with each passing minute, and strict rules of engagement designed to minimize civilian casualties in an area where distinguishing combatants from non-combatants was often impossible until it was too late. Rachel felt the aircraft bank as they approached the drop zone, a partially collapsed building approximately 800 meters from their target. The distance was farther than ideal, but it offered the only viable insertion point that wouldn't immediately compromise their presence. 90 seconds to drop, the pilot's voice crackled through her comms. Rachel gave a thumbs up, then turned to her team. No speeches, no dramatic declarations. That wasn't her style, and these professionals didn't need it. Just a simple nod that conveyed everything necessary. I trust you. We do this together. We all come home. The Black Hawk hovered momentarily over the drop zone, and one by one, the SEAL team fast roped down to the rooftop below. Rachel went last, the rope burning against her gloved hands as she descended into the swirling dust. The moment her boots touched concrete, the helicopter banked away, disappearing into the night sky now tinged with the ominous orange-brown of the approaching sandstorm. "Comms check," she subvocalized, adjusting her night vision goggles as the team assembled in a defensive perimeter. One by one, her operators confirmed their status. All equipment functional, all personnel ready to proceed. Rachel pulled up the building schematics on her tactical display, confirming their route one final time. Angel 1 to Overwatch. We are on target and proceeding to objective. She transmitted to the command center monitoring their operation from hundreds of miles away. Copy Angel 1. Be advised, satellite shows increased movement at the objective. Count now at approximately 30 combatants. Over. Rachel exchanged glances with Sullivan. Their original intel had estimated 15 hostiles. 30 changed the calculus considerably. Understood, Overwatch. Proceeding as planned, we'll advise if mission parameters require adjustment. Angel 1 out. Sullivan raised an eyebrow. That's a lot of additional firepower for a random Tuesday, Commander. Could mean our assets cover is already compromised, Rachel replied, her mind rapidly recalculating approach vectors and extraction scenarios. All the more reason to move fast. Standard formation, Sean on point, move. The team descended from the rooftop, moving through the abandoned building with practiced silence. Outside, the first real gusts of the sandstorm began to howl through the empty window frames, providing welcome audio cover, but also a timer ticking down against their mission. Once the storm hit full force, extraction would become exponentially more difficult, if not impossible. 800 meters had never felt so far. Every alleyway required clearing. Every intersection presented potential exposure to civilian observers or enemy combatants. The neighborhoods in this part of the city were maze-like, designed long before modern urban planning, with narrow passages that suddenly opened into small courtyards, dead ends that appeared without warning, and countless hiding spots for anyone wishing to ambush unwary travelers. They were halfway to the objective when Rachel's instincts flared. She raised a closed fist, the signal to halt, a split second before the sound of voices carried to them on the dusty wind. Sullivan immediately directed the team into defensive positions as Rachel edged forward to assess. A patrol of 6 armed men had entered the alleyway ahead, their weapons held casually but ready. Not military, their formation was too loose. Their discipline lacking, but definitely combatants and directly in the SEAL team's planned route. Rachel weighed their options. Engaging would create noise and potentially alert the main force at their objective. Detouring would cost precious time they didn't have. Finding an elevated bypass would be ideal, but the surrounding buildings offered no obvious route. Before she could signal her decision, Sullivan pointed upward. Rachel followed his gaze to see a narrow ledge running along the buildings, approximately 15 feet above street level, not on any of their maps, possibly an architectural feature specific to this neighborhood. Barely wide enough for passage, it would be risky, especially in the increasing wind, but it offered a way forward without engagement. Rachel nodded, and the team began their ascent, using crumbling masonry and ancient drain pipes to reach the improvised path. The sandstorm's vanguard was upon them now, visibility decreasing by the minute as fine particles began to infiltrate every exposed surface. Even with their specialized gear, the operators would soon be dealing with the effects of the abrasive dust on equipment and breathing. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Moving in single file along the treacherous ledge, Rachel felt that same strange sensation from earlier, the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. She scanned the surroundings, her enhanced optics cutting through the worsening conditions, but detected nothing. Still, 2 decades of operational experience had taught her to trust these instincts. Something was out there, observing their progress. They cleared the patrol and regained the street level, pushing forward with renewed urgency as the storm intensified. The objective building now loomed ahead, a 4-story structure with a distinctive blue door, currently guarded by 4 armed men, lounging with the false casualness of those expecting trouble. Rachel signaled a halt in the shelter of an abandoned storefront, gathering her team close to be heard over the rising wind. Intel suggests the asset is being held on the 3rd floor, north side. Sullivan, you take Diaz and Rodriguez to secure our exfil route. Chun, Walker, and Kim, you're with me on the primary objective. Johnston and Martinez provide overwatch from that position. She indicated a partially collapsed building with direct sightlines to both the front and rear of the target structure. Rules of engagement? Chun asked, checking his suppressed weapon. We're here for extraction only. Engage only if directly threatened or if the asset is in imminent danger. Priority is getting her out alive and intact. Rachel's tone left no room for misinterpretation. This wasn't an assassination or demolition mission. It was a rescue, with all the additional complexities that entailed. The team split as directed, moving into their assigned positions with the synchronized efficiency of a unit that had operated together through countless high-risk scenarios. Rachel led her element toward the rear of the building, where their intelligence indicated a service entrance with lighter security. The sandstorm was now their ally and enemy simultaneously, providing cover from visual detection but drastically complicating every aspect of the operation. Sand particles found their way into every crevice of their equipment, and visibility was reduced to less than 30 meters even with enhanced optics. Overwatch to Angel 1, the command center's transmission came through with noticeable static. Be advised, storm is intensifying beyond predicted parameters. Extraction window is closing. Estimate 30 minutes maximum before birds cannot safely operate in your AO. Copy Overwatch. We're proceeding to objective now. Rachel's reply was terse. 30 minutes was barely enough time for the extraction itself, let alone securing the asset. The rear of the building was guarded by 2 men sheltering from the worst of the sand in a recessed doorway, their attention focused more on protection from the elements than security. Rachel gave the signal, and Chun and Walker moved forward in perfect synchronization, neutralizing the guards with silent efficiency, pressure holds that rendered them unconscious without permanent damage or sound. The service door was locked, but Kim made quick work of it with specialized tools. Rachel took point as they entered, her weapon up and ready, senses hyper-alert to any sign of resistance. The building's interior was dimly lit, the power fluctuating with the storm's intensity. Voices echoed from somewhere above, men speaking rapidly in a local dialect that Rachel partially understood from her years in the region. The tone conveyed urgency, tension. They're planning to move her, she whispered to her team. Something about the storm providing cover. We need to accelerate. The team advanced up the narrow service stairwell, clearing each landing with practiced precision. The 2nd floor appeared to be a command center of sorts, with maps and communications equipment visible through partially open doors. 4 armed men were visible, but the SEAL team passed undetected, continuing toward their objective on the 3rd floor. As they approached the final flight of stairs, Rachel's earpiece crackled. "Commander," Johnston's voice came through, tight with controlled tension. "We've got movement. A lot of it. Vehicles approaching from the north and east. Looks like at least 15 additional combatants incoming. Ada, 3 minutes." Rachel processed this new information instantly. Their window was collapsing, not just from the storm, but from the arriving reinforcements. Whatever was happening here was bigger than their intelligence had indicated. Copy. Maintain overwatch and alert if they enter the building. We're proceeding to secure the asset now. The third-floor corridor stretched before them, 5 doors on each side leading to what appeared to be repurposed living quarters. Their intelligence had indicated the northern room at the end of the hall, but Rachel now faced a critical decision: clear each room methodically, ensuring no threats remain behind them, or move directly to the objective and risk potential ambush. The sound of raised voices from the room in question made the decision for her. The asset was in immediate danger. Rachel signaled the plan: a direct breach of the target room, and the team stacked up outside the door. Through the thin walls, she could hear a man shouting, a woman's voice responding with defiant anger despite obvious fear. Chun placed a breaching charge on the door's lock, and Rachel counted down with her fingers. 3, 2, 1. The charge detonated with a sharp crack, and the door swung inward. Rachel was first through the breach, her weapon finding targets with practiced precision. 2 men standing. One immediate threat, armed, turning toward the door with weapon raising. 2 controlled shots, center mass. The second man, unarmed but reaching for something at his waist, single shot to the shoulder, neutralizing without killing. Chun and Walker secured the rest of the room as Kim moved directly to the woman bound to a chair in the center. Their asset, Farida Hassan, a 38-year-old doctor who had been providing critical intelligence on insurgent movements for over a year. Her face was bruised, one eye swollen shut, but the defiance in her remaining good eye burned undiminished. U.S. Navy SEALs, Rachel identified herself, kneeling beside the woman as Kim cut her restraints. "We're here to extract you. Can you move?" Farida nodded, grimacing as circulation returned to her limbs. "They know everything," she said in accented English. "My entire network. They've been rounding everyone up since yesterday. I thought you wouldn't come." "We keep our promises," Rachel replied simply, helping the woman to her feet. "Walker, assist the asset. Chun, take point. We're leaving now." As they regrouped in the hallway, Johnston's urgent voice came through their coms. "Commander, Tango's entering the building. At least 10 heavily armed. They're moving fast, sweeping systematically. Sullivan, status on exfil?" Rachel demanded, leading her team toward the stairwell. "South route is still clear, Commander, but not for long. Storm's a full-blown nightmare now. Visibility 0 beyond 20 meters. Rachel made a split-second calculation. All elements converge on south exit, double time, overwatch, requesting immediate extraction at secondary LZ. "Negative, Angel 1, came the reply that Rachel had been dreading. "Birds are grounded. Storm intensity exceeds safety parameters. No air assets available for at least 2 hours. The team froze momentarily, the implications clear. They were on their own, in hostile territory, with a high-value asset who could barely walk, surrounded by enemy forces, with no extraction and a sandstorm of biblical proportions raging outside. Rachel's mind raced through alternatives. Call for ground transport? Too slow and too conspicuous. Shelter in place and wait out the storm? Impossible with the building being actively searched. Fight their way out? Potentially suicidal against superior numbers and would endanger the asset. We need a diversion, she decided. Sullivan, plant charges on the north side. Remote detonation. Chun, find us transport, anything with wheels and fuel. The rest of you, we're moving to the south exit now. The team acknowledged their orders and moved with renewed purpose. Rachel supported Farida on one side as they descended the stairs, every sense alert for the enemy forces they knew were sweeping the building. Above them, the sound of boots on stairs and shouted commands grew louder. They had just reached the ground floor when the first shots rang out, not at them, but at Johnston and Martinez's overwatch position. Through her coms, Rachel could hear the controlled bursts of return fire as her operators engaged. "Multiple hostiles at our position," Martinez reported calmly. We're suppressing but cannot hold for long. Fall back to the secondary LZ, Rachel ordered. We'll meet you there. Sullivan's voice broke in. Charges set, Commander. Ready on your signal. South exit secured, Diaz added. But we've got a problem. Streets are filling with tangos. They're setting up a perimeter. They were being boxed in, Rachel realized. This wasn't a random security response. It was a coordinated effort by an enemy who knew exactly who they were dealing with and was determined to capture both the asset and the American special operators. Rachel made another calculation. The risks were mounting by the second, but standing still meant certain failure. New plan. Sullivan, detonate on my mark. Everyone else were punching straight through the south perimeter the moment the charges blow. Stay tight, protect the asset at all costs. She positioned her team in the shadowed interior of the building's southern exit, where they could observe the enemy forces establishing positions outside. Through the howling sandstorm, she counted at least 8 fighters taking cover behind vehicles and rubble. On my mark. 3, 2, 1. Mark. The building shook as Sullivan's charges detonated on the northern side. Even through the storm, the explosion was substantial, exactly the distraction they needed. As predicted, several of the fighters outside turned toward the sound and commotion, momentarily distracted. Go, go, go! Rachel ordered, and the team burst from the building in tight formation, weapons up and firing with precise controlled bursts. The surprise was total. 3 hostiles went down before they could react. 2 more scrambled for better cover, returning fire wildly through the swirling sand. Rachel felt a round impact her plate carrier as she pushed Fallujah forward. The kinetic force like a hammer blow to her ribs, but the armor doing its job. Sullivan and Diaz provided covering fire as the team moved through the perimeter, heading for the narrow alleyways where their pursuers' superior numbers would be less advantageous. The sandstorm engulfed them completely now, visibility reduced to arm's length, even with enhanced optics. It was disorienting, claustrophobic, but also vital cover as they pushed through the maze-like streets. Behind them, shouts and sporadic gunfire indicated their pursuers were giving chase, but struggling to maintain contact in the blinding conditions. Chun, status on transport? Rachel demanded through her comms, wincing at the pain in her side where the round had struck her armor. 2 blocks south, came the reply. Captured a technical with half a tank. Ready when you are. It was the first piece of good news in what felt like hours. Moving to your position now. All elements converge. They pushed forward through the storm, the wind now so powerful it threatened to knock them off balance with each stronger gust. Sand had infiltrated every piece of equipment, causing warnings to flash across Rachel's tactical display as systems struggled to function in the extreme conditions. Fallujah stumbled beside her, clearly reaching the limits of her endurance after the ordeal of captivity and now this desperate escape. Without hesitation, Walker moved to fully support the woman's weight, virtually carrying her as they continued their advance. Contact rear, Rodriguez warned, and the team instinctively moved into a defensive pattern as shadows materialized from the swirling sand behind them. 3 pursuers who had managed to keep pace despite the conditions. The firefight was brief but intense, muzzle flashes illuminating the storm darkened alleyway as both sides exchanged fire at dangerously close range. One of the pursuers fell immediately. Another took cover and continued firing until a precise shot from Sullivan ended the threat. The third turned to flee, clearly intending to report their position to the main force. Can't let him report back, Rachel decided instantly. Sullivan with me. The rest of you, continue to the vehicle. Before her team could object, Rachel was moving, Sullivan falling in beside her as they pursued the fleeing figure through the choking storm. The man had a head start, but was hampered by the same conditions affecting everyone: near-zero visibility, treacherous footing, and the relentless assault of wind-driven sand that made every breath a struggle. They cornered him in a small courtyard, cutting off his retreat as he frantically spoke into a radio. Sullivan's shot was perfect. The radio exploded in a shower of sparks and plastic, the man clutching his injured hand in shock. Rachel approached cautiously, weapon trained on the now disarmed enemy. "English?" she demanded. The man glared back, defiance and fear warring in his expression. "Enough," he spat. "Who sent the reinforcements? How did they know we were coming?" The questions were direct, demanding immediate answers in a situation where time was critically short. The man's laugh was unexpected, a harsh, bitter sound barely audible above the storm. "You Americans. So predictable. Always thinking you're the hunters when you're really the prey." "Answer the question," Sullivan growled, his weapon unwavering. "She wanted you to come," the man replied, his eyes fixed on Rachel with unsettling intensity. "Said you would. Said to test you, see if you deserve her help." Rachel felt that same strange sensation from earlier, the feeling of being watched, intensified to an almost physical pressure. "Who wanted us to come?" The man's smile widened. "The one you call the ghost. She's watching. Always watching. Judging who lives and who dies." His hand moved suddenly toward his vest. Sullivan reacted instantly, a single shot ending the potential threat. As the man collapsed, Rachel saw what he'd been reaching for, not a weapon, but a small metallic emblem pinned inside his jacket. A stylized hourglass, rendered in what appeared to be silver. "Commander," Chun's urgent voice came through her comms. "Multiple vehicles approaching. We need to move now." "On our way," Rachel replied, taking one last look at the fallen man and the strange emblem before turning to Sullivan. "Did you hear what he said?" "Ghost stories, Commander," Sullivan replied, though his expression betrayed uncertainty. "Let's get out of here before we become ghosts ourselves." They rejoined the team at the captured technical, a pickup truck mounted with a heavy machine gun that had been hastily disabled by Chun to prevent it being used against them. The team crowded in, Fallujah secured in the center with the most protection, as Chun gunned the engine and they lurched forward into the howling maelstrom. The technical lurched through streets transformed into tunnels of swirling sand, Chun navigating by instinct and fragmented GPS data that flickered unpredictably on their compromised equipment. Visibility had deteriorated to near zero, the world beyond there. Vehicle reduced to vague shadows and occasional flashes of light where other structures momentarily broke the storm's intensity. "Primary extraction point is compromised," Rachel shouted over the combined roar of the engine and the howling wind. "We need alternatives." Sullivan consulted the tactical display on his wrist, the screen periodically obscured by sand despite his efforts to protect it. "Old Marketplace, 2 kilometers southeast. Enough cover for defensive position until the storm passes or extraction becomes viable." Rachel nodded, making the decision immediately. "Chun, southeast. Best speed possible." The technical swerved as Chen adjusted their course, the vehicle's suspension groaning in protest as they navigated over debris hidden beneath accumulating drifts of sand. Behind them, the occasional flash of headlights indicated their pursuers had not abandoned the chase, though the storm was proving as effective a deterrent for them as for the SEAL team. In the back of the vehicle, Walker was monitoring Fallujah, whose condition was deteriorating rapidly. The woman's face was gray with exhaustion and pain, her breathing shallow. "Commander," Walker's voice held controlled urgency. "Asset needs medical attention soon. Possible internal injuries from her interrogation." Rachel processed this new complication with the cold efficiency required of combat leaders. Faridah's intelligence was critical, potentially, saving hundreds of lives if they could get her out, but the woman herself was equally important. Not just as an asset, but as a human being who had risked everything to help them. Sullivan medkit. Rachel moved to examine Fallujah herself, her trained eyes quickly assessing the visible injuries. The facial bruising was severe, indicating repeated blows, and the woman's reaction suggested at least one broken rib, possibly more. "Hang in there," Rachel told her, administering a field injection of pain medication. "We're getting you out." Fallujah's good eye fixed on Rachel with surprising clarity. "They knew you were coming," she whispered. "She told them you would come for me." Rachel felt that same cold sensation from earlier, the prickling awareness of unseen observation. "Who told them, Fallujah? Who is she?" Before the woman could answer, the technical suddenly swerved violently, then lurched to a halt. Chun swore vehemently in 3 languages. "Roadblock ahead," he reported, his voice tight with tension. Recent too, wasn't on any intel. Rachel moved forward to assess the situation. Through the swirling sand, she could make out the shadowy outlines of vehicles positioned. Across the street, a deliberate blockade that would force them either to stop or divert down narrower side streets, where their vehicles' mobility would be severely compromised. Options? She demanded, her mind already calculating trajectories, weapons capabilities, and the declining condition of their asset. "We could try to punch through," Chun suggested, though his tone indicated the low probability of success. "Or there's an alley to the right tight, but might get us around." "Negative on breakthrough," Sullivan countered. "Those are reinforced positions. We'd be sitting ducks." The decision crystallized in Rachel's mind with the clarity that had kept her alive through countless similar situations. "We go on foot. Ditch the vehicle as a distraction." "Sullivan, rig something loud." The team moved with practiced efficiency, preparing for the transition from vehicular to foot movement, while Sullivan quickly assembled an improvised device from spare ammunition and available materials. Within minutes, they were ready, Fallujah supported between Walker and Kim, the rest of the team forming a protective perimeter with weapons at ready positions. "On my mark," Rachel ordered, her voice steady despite the mounting pressure of their situation. 3, 2, 1. Execute. Sullivan triggered his device, and immediately the team was moving, slipping into the narrow alleyway as the technical erupted in a series of controlled detonations behind them. The diversion worked perfectly. Through the howling storm they could hear shouts of confusion from the roadblock as attention focused on the burning vehicle. The alleyway was barely wide enough for 2 people to move abreast, its walls offering some protection from the worst of the storm, but creating a potential fatal funnel if they were discovered. Rachel took point, moving forward with her weapon up, senses straining to detect threats through the environmental interference. After approximately 200 meters, the alley opened into what appeared to be the edge of the marketplace Sullivan had identified, now deserted due to the storm, its normally bustling stalls abandoned, canvas awnings whipping violently in the wind where they hadn't already been torn away. "Overwatch," Rachel subvocalized into her comms. "Status on extraction options." The reply came back fragmented, static breaking the transmission into barely comprehensible segments. "Storm intensity. No air assets. 6 hours minimum. Ground transport. En route. ETA unknown due to conditions." The message was clear enough despite the interference. They were on their own for the foreseeable future. Rachel processed this information dispassionately, already formulating their next moves. "We hold position here," she decided, indicating a partially collapsed structure on the marketplace's edge that offered both cover from the elements and good defensive positions with multiple exit options. "Set security, tend to the asset, conserve ammunition and water. This storm works for us as much as against us. Pursuers will have the same visibility issues we do." The team moved to secure the building, clearing it room by room despite the low probability of occupants in these conditions. As they established their defensive position, Rachel conducted a status check. All team members were operational despite minor injuries, Equipment was compromised but functional. Ammunition was sufficient for a significant engagement if necessary. Fallujah was their greatest concern. The woman had lapsed into semi-consciousness, her breathing increasingly labored. Walker, who had the most extensive medical training among them, worked efficiently to stabilize her condition, but her assessment was blunt. "She needs proper medical care, Commander, soon." Rachel nodded, accepting this reality without allowing it to distract from their immediate priorities. "Do what you can. We'll get her out." As the teams settled into their defensive positions, the strange sensation of being watched returned stronger than ever. Rachel moved restlessly through their temporary shelter, checking and rechecking positions, reviewing their limited options with Sullivan, pushing away the growing discomfort that felt increasingly less like combat intuition and more like something she had no framework to understand. "You feel it too, don't you?" Sullivan's question was quiet, pitched for her ears alone as they stood by one of the glassless windows, watching the storm rage outside. Rachel didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Like we're being observed, assessed." Sullivan nodded, his weathered face grave in the dim light. "That emblem on the insurgent, I've seen it before." Kandahar, 2019. After the incident, Taylor's team reported. "The ghost story again?" Rachel couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice, though it felt increasingly hollow. "We've got enough real threats without chasing phantoms, Chief. What if the threat and the phantom are connected?" Sullivan persisted. "Those reinforcements were waiting for us. That roadblock was set up exactly where we'd be most vulnerable. Someone knew our route, our protocols." Suggesting what? That some mythical operator is orchestrating this entire scenario as some kind of test? Rachel shook her head. "That's beyond paranoid, even for you." Sullivan remained undeterred. "The man said she wanted to see if we deserved her help. What if that wasn't just the ramblings of a fanatic? What if we are being tested?" Before Rachel could respond, Martinez called out from his position. "Movement, southeast corner of the marketplace." Instantly, the team was on alert, weapons trained toward the indicated direction. Through the swirling sand, shadowy figures were indeed moving, carefully, methodically, in a pattern that spoke of military training rather than insurgent tactics. "Count?" Rachel demanded, her own weapon tracking the movement. "At least 6, maybe more," Martinez replied. "Formation suggests they know exactly where they're going." Rachel made a rapid assessment. "They're tracking us somehow." "Electronics check. Anything broadcasting?" The team quickly examined their equipment, searching for any device that might be compromised. It was Kim who discovered the problem, a tiny transmitter expertly hidden in the seam of Farida's clothing. "Clever," Rachel acknowledged grimly as Kim disabled the device. "But it's already done its job." The approaching figures were closer now, their outlines more distinct through the storm. Rachel counted 8 combatants moving in a textbook search pattern, their weapons held ready but not firing. They wanted to confirm their target before engaging. "Hold fire unless directly threatened," Rachel ordered her team. "We're outnumbered and need to conserve ammunition. Let them pass if possible." The tension in their shelter was palpable as the search team moved methodically closer. 20 meters, 15, 10. Rachel could now make out details of their equipment, military grade. Not the mismatched arsenal typical of insurgents in this region. Whoever these people were, they were well-funded and well-trained. Just as it seemed detection was inevitable, the unthinkable happened. A new figure materialized from the storm behind the search team, a solitary shadow moving with such fluid grace, it seemed, almost afloat across the sand-covered ground. One moment it wasn't there. The next it was among the searchers like a predator among prey. What followed defied comprehension. The figure, distinctly female in form, though wrapped in clothing that blended perfectly with the storm, moved through the search team with impossible speed and precision. No wasted motion, no hesitation, Just the clinical application of violence with an efficiency Rachel had never witnessed in 22 years of special operations. One combatant dropped silently, then another. A third turned, alerted by some sixth sense, only to collapse before he could raise his weapon. The fourth managed to fire, a single shot that vanished harmlessly into the storm, before a blade flashed in the dim light and he joined his comrades on the ground. The remaining four reacted with the speed of trained operators, forming a hasty defensive circle and returning fire at their attacker. But they might as well have been shooting at the storm itself. The figure seemed to anticipate every movement, every line of fire, materializing briefly to eliminate another threat before disappearing again into the swirling sand. In less than 30 seconds, it was over. 8 trained combatants neutralized by a single operator who now stood motionless among the fallen, head slightly tilted as if listening to something only she could hear. Rachel and her team watched in stunned silence, weapons trained on the figure but holding fire. This wasn't a threat they understood, wasn't anything they had protocols for. Then the figure turned toward their shelter and began walking directly toward them, unaffected by the raging storm, moving with the measured confidence of someone who feared nothing in this world or beyond it. "Orders, Commander?" Chun's voice was steady despite the unprecedented situation, his weapon tracking the approaching figure. Rachel made her decision based on instinct rather than protocol. "Hold fire, but stay ready." The figure stopped just outside their shelter, sand swirling around her like a living cloak. Now they could see her more clearly, a woman of indeterminate age, her face partially obscured by specialized gear similar to but more advanced than their own. Her clothing was neither military nor civilian, but something altogether different, functional, formless, the color of the desert itself. The only distinctive feature was a small silver emblem at her collar, the same hourglass symbol they had seen on the insurgent. For a long moment, she simply stood there, observing them through inscrutable goggles. Then, with deliberate movements, she reached up and removed the facial protection, revealing features that were striking not for their beauty, but for their absolute neutrality, as if all expression had been deliberately trained away, leaving only purpose. "Commander Westbrook." Her voice was surprisingly ordinary, neither particularly high nor low, with no discernible accent. "Your team performs adequately under pressure, but your asset is dying." Rachel maintained her combat stance, weapon not directly aimed at the woman, but ready to be brought to bear in an instant. "Who are you?" The woman's lips curved in what might have been amusement on any other face. "You know who I am. Your chief has told you the stories. Some call me the Ghost, some have other names. None are important. What do you want?" Rachel demanded, unnerved by the woman's calm certainty, despite her efforts to conceal it. "The better question is, what do you want, Commander?" The Ghost's gaze shifted to where Farida lay semi-conscious, Walker still attending to her deteriorating condition. "Your mission parameters are failing. Your asset will not survive 6 more hours without intervention. Your extraction is uncertain at best. Your pursuers are more numerous and better informed than your intelligence suggested." She took a single step forward, and Rachel noted how Sullivan and Chun tensed, fingers tightening imperceptibly on triggers. "You have 2 options. Continue as you are, with a high probability of failure and death, or accept my assistance." "Why would you help us?" Rachel's question cut to the heart of her suspicion. In her experience, unexpected assistance always came with equally unexpected costs. The Ghost's expression remained unnervingly neutral. "I have my reasons, as you have yours." Her gaze seemed to penetrate Rachel's defenses, seeing things the commander had long kept hidden even from herself. "Your reasons for this mission, are they worthy?" "We're extracting a high-value intelligence asset whose information will save lives," Rachel replied automatically, the official mission parameters flowing from her lips with practiced ease. That is what your orders say, the ghost acknowledged. But why are you here, Rachel Westbrook? What drives you to risk 8 operators for 1 civilian informant? Policy? Duty? Something else? The use of her full name, not her rank, not her call sign, sent a chill through Rachel that had nothing to do with the howling storm outside. This woman knew her. Not just her designation or her position, but her. She trusted us, Rachel said finally, the truth emerging despite her training to reveal nothing. She believed we would come for her, no matter the cost. And she was right. Something flickered across the ghost's impassive features, the barest suggestion of approval. Loyalty, honor, these are worthy reasons. She moved further into the shelter, and remarkably, Rachel's team parted for her, despite no order to do so. Your asset requires immediate medical intervention that exceeds your field capabilities. The ghost knelt beside Farida, examining her with clinical efficiency. From a pouch at her waist, she withdrew items that Rachel didn't recognize, certainly not standard medical supplies, issued to any military unit she was familiar with. "What are you doing?" Walker demanded, protective of her patient despite the bizarre circumstances. "Stabilizing her," the ghost replied simply. "This will buy you approximately 3 hours. Sufficient time." "Time for what?" Rachel asked, watching as the mysterious woman administered something to Farida via an unusual delivery system that seemed to bypass traditional injection methods. The ghost stood, replacing her gear with practiced movements. "Time to reach the extraction point I will provide. My team has secured a route through the storm. Your pursuit has been temporarily discouraged." "Your team?" Sullivan spoke for the first time, his voice betraying his surprise. "There are more of you." The ghost's expression remained unreadable. "There are enough of us." She turned back to Rachel. "You have proven worthy of assistance, Commander Westbrook. Not all who seek it do. And what happens to those deemed unworthy?" Rachel couldn't help asking, though part of her didn't want to know the answer. "They fail," the ghost stated simply, "as all must who serve unworthy causes or with unworthy hearts." She moved toward the shelter's entrance, pausing at the threshold. "Your new extraction coordinates are being transmitted to your secure channel now. You have precisely 170 minutes to reach the location. I suggest you move quickly." Before Rachel could respond, the ghost was gone, stepping into the swirling sandstorm and vanishing as completely as if she had never existed. Only the prone forms of the neutralized search team outside and Farida's suddenly improved condition provided evidence that the encounter had been real at all. The SEAL team remained frozen for several seconds, weapons still at ready positions, eyes searching the storm for any sign of the mysterious woman's continued presence. It was Chun who finally broke the silence. "Commander, did that just happen?" Rachel checked her tactical display, finding to her astonishment that new coordinates had indeed appeared in their secure communications channel. Coordinates, approximately 4 kilometers northeast of their position, with a marked route that avoided known enemy positions and took maximum advantage of available cover. "Apparently it did," she replied, her mind racing to integrate this unprecedented development into their operational planning. "Sullivan, verify these coordinates against our maps." "Walker, status on the asset?" Walker was examining Farida with undisguised amazement. "She's stabilized, Commander. Breathing normalized, pulse steady. I don't understand how, but she's significantly improved." Sullivan looked up from his analysis of the newly provided extraction route. "Coordinates check out. It's an old landing zone from the early days of the conflict. Hasn't been used in years, but it's structurally sound according to our data. The route avoids all known checkpoints and observation posts." Rachel weighed their options, which had suddenly expanded from near-certain failure to potential success. The rational, trained part of her mind screamed caution, This could be an elaborate trap, a means to capture not just Fallujah, but an entire SEAL team. Yet a deeper instinct, the same one that had kept her alive through countless operations where intel had failed and only gut feeling remained, told her the opposite. Prep for movement, she decided. We follow the provided route. Standard tactical formation, maximum alert. This could still be a setup, so we proceed as if we're moving through hostile territory, because we are. As the team prepared to move out, Rachel found herself standing beside Sullivan, both of them watching the storm rage outside their temporary shelter. 20 years in special operations, Sullivan said quietly. Thought I'd seen everything. Guess I was wrong. Rachel nodded, her eyes still searching the swirling sands for any sign of their mysterious benefactor. If we make it back, will you include this in your report? Sullivan's laugh was short and without humor. Would you believe me if I did? Fair point. Rachel checked her weapon one final time, a habit so ingrained it required no conscious thought. Let's focus on the immediate objective, reaching that extraction point with our asset intact. We can debate ghost stories when we're safely back at base. But as they moved out into the storm once more, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that they were still being watched, still being evaluated. The ghost had deemed them worthy of assistance, but what exactly did that mean? And what would happen if they were found wanting? The sandstorm transformed the world into a howling void, obliterating landmarks and disorienting even the most experienced operators. Rachel led her team through this chaotic landscape, navigating by the digital markers provided by their mysterious benefactor. Each step required deliberate focus, the wind threatening to topple them, the sand accumulating in drifts that concealed treacherous footing beneath. Fallujah moved with them now, supported between Walker and Chun, but conscious and alert in a way that defied medical explanation. Whatever the ghost had administered had done more than stabilize her. It had temporarily restored her strength, though the woman's face still showed the unmistakable tension of someone pushing through significant pain. 2 clicks to extraction point, Sullivan reported, his voice barely audible over the storm, despite their advanced communications equipment. Route remains clear according to these markers. Rachel acknowledged with a nod, her attention divided between their path forward and the constant vigilance required in hostile territory. The ghost might have discouraged their pursuers, but Rachel had survived too many operations gone sideways to rely on anyone's assurances, especially those of a figure straight from special operations mythology. They moved in silence for several minutes, each focused on the immediate challenges of movement and security. It was Fallujah who finally spoke, her voice surprisingly steady given her condition. You've encountered her before? She asked Rachel, no need to specify who her referred to. Rachel glanced at the woman, measuring her response. No, only stories from other operators. You? Fallujah's expression grew distant, as if recalling something beyond ordinary experience. 3 years ago. A mission went wrong. Not your people, another allied unit. They were extracting a defector, but their position was compromised. My brother was their interpreter. Everyone was killed except him. And the ghost intervened? Rachel prompted when Fallujah fell silent. The woman nodded. She appeared during the final moments, when the enemy was closing in. My brother said she moved like nothing human, eliminated 19 hostiles in less than a minute. When it was over, she stood among them and asked him a question. Why do you serve? What did he answer? Sullivan asked, drawn into the conversation despite the tactical situation. He told her the truth, that he believed in a better future for our country, that working with Western forces offered the best chance for that future. Fallujah's good eye held Rachel's gaze. She deemed his reason worthy. She led him to safety, then vanished. He thought perhaps he had hallucinated her from blood loss and fear, until I encountered her myself during my recruitment as an asset. She recruited you? Rachel couldn't hide her surprise. Not directly. But she was there, watching, when your intelligence officers first approached me. Later, she came to my home, just appeared, as if the walls meant nothing. She asked me the same question she asked my brother. Why do you serve? And your answer? Rachel asked, already suspecting what it might have been. For the same future my brother believes in. For my daughter to grow up in a country where she can become anything, not just what men decide she should be. Farida's expression hardened. The ghost nodded once, then said something I still don't understand. Remember this choice when the cost seems too high. Worthy causes demand worthy sacrifices. Rachel processed this information against the backdrop of their current situation. The implications were disturbing, that this mysterious operator had been involved in their intelligence network for years, influencing recruitment, perhaps even operations, without any official awareness or sanction. Commander, Martinez interrupted from his position on their right flank. Movement ahead. 2 o'clock, approximately 50 meters. The team instantly shifted to defensive posture, weapons oriented toward the potential threat. Through the swirling sand, Rachel could make out the shadowy outlines of what appeared to be 3 figures, holding position rather than advancing. Hold fire, she ordered, studying the figures with growing certainty about their identity. I think we have an escort. As they drew closer, her suspicion was confirmed. 3 operators stood waiting, their equipment and bearing identical to the ghosts. The same desert-colored garments that seemed to shift with the sand. The same advanced gear that exceeded anything in standard military inventory. They made no greeting, no acknowledgement beyond the slightest nod from the apparent leader, who then turned and began moving, clearly expecting Rachel's team to follow. Chatty bunch, Chun muttered over their internal comms. Focus on the objective, Rachel responded, though she shared his unease. If they're leading us to extraction, I don't care if they communicate in interpretive dance. The new formation moved swiftly through the storm, the mysterious operators seemingly unaffected by the conditions that hampered even Rachel's elite team. They navigated with absolute confidence, occasionally using hand signals to indicate direction changes or potential hazards, but never speaking. After approximately 15 minutes of this silent progress, the landscape began to change. The densely packed buildings of the city gave way to more scattered structures, and eventually the outline of what appeared to be an abandoned airfield emerged from the swirling sand. LZ ahead, Sullivan confirmed, checking their coordinates. Matches the extraction point we were given. The escort led them to a partially collapsed hangar that offered shelter from the worst of the storm. Inside, Rachel was surprised to find a fully equipped medical station had been established, along with communications gear that looked decades ahead of current military technology. 2 more of the silent operators waited inside, one immediately moving to assist Farida to the medical station, while the other monitored what appeared to be a perimeter security system of unrecognizable design. Your extraction aircraft will arrive in approximately 42 minutes. The leader of their escort finally spoke, her voice carrying the same neutral tone as the ghosts. Your asset requires further treatment to survive transport. Rachel studied the woman carefully, noting the same silver hourglass emblem at her collar. You're not regular military. Not any branch or unit I've encountered in 22 years of service. Correct. The woman's response was devoid of elaboration. Then who do you work for? Rachel pressed, unwilling to simply accept this inexplicable assistance without understanding its source. The woman's expression remained impassive. We serve the worthy. As we all should. Before Rachel could pursue this frustratingly vague answer, a commotion from the medical station drew her attention. Farida had seized the arm of her silent attendant, her face contorted with sudden urgency. Tell her. Farida called out to Rachel. Tell her now, while there's still time. Rachel moved quickly to the woman's side. Tell who what, Farida? Her, Farida gestured weakly toward the leader of their escort. The intelligence I carry, It's more than attack plans. There's a list. Names of collaborators within your own military structure. High-ranking officials who have been compromised. That's why they were so determined to silence me. The leader of the escort team was suddenly beside them, her previously neutral expression sharpened with interest. Explain. Fallujah struggled to sit up despite her injuries. 3 colonels and a general, working with the insurgency. Providing operational details, movement schedules, intelligence identities. They're the reason so many missions have failed in this region. The reason so many of your people have died. The information hit Rachel with physical force. If true, it explained countless operational failures over the past 2 years, missions that had gone wrong despite perfect planning, assets who had been compromised despite rigorous security protocols, ambushes that had occurred where no enemy should have been present. Names, the escort leader demanded, her neutral facade cracking to reveal something cold and terrible beneath. We require the names. Fallujah looked to Rachel, a silent question in her eyes. Rachel understood the woman's hesitation. She had agreed to provide intelligence to official American military channels, not to this mysterious group operating outside those structures. It's your decision, Rachel told her honestly. But if what you're saying is true, official channels may be compromised as well. Fallujah considered this for a long moment, then made her decision. She beckoned the escort leader closer and began speaking in a low, urgent voice. Rachel couldn't hear the names being shared, but she could see the subtle changes in the other woman's posture, a new tension, a contained energy that reminded her of a predator catching a scent. When Fallujah finished, the escort leader straightened, her expression once again carefully neutral. This information has been confirmed through our own sources. The individuals named are indeed compromised. She turned to Rachel. Your mission parameters have expanded, Commander Westbrook. This intelligence must reach your command structure intact, unfiltered by those who would suppress it. Rachel felt the weight of this new responsibility settle on her shoulders, not just extracting Fallujah, but ensuring that her intelligence reached the right people, bypassing potential traitors within their own ranks. It was a mission that could end her career if handled incorrectly, or potentially save countless lives if executed properly. We'll ensure it reaches the appropriate authorities, she promised, already calculating who among the higher echelons she could trust implicitly. The escort leader studied her with unsettling intensity, as if measuring her capability and commitment. See that you do. The worthy do not fail their obligations, regardless of personal cost. A sudden alert from the perimeter security system interrupted their conversation. One of the silent operators monitoring the equipment straightened, signing rapidly to the leader. We have incoming hostiles, the leader translated for Rachel's benefit. Multiple vehicles approaching from the south, not standard insurgent forces. These are specialized units with advanced equipment. They know exactly where you are. Rachel's mind raced through the implications. The compromised officers. They're trying to prevent this intelligence from reaching our command. Precisely. The escort leader gestured to her team, who immediately began preparations for combat with practiced efficiency. Your extraction is still 26 minutes out. We will hold this position until your aircraft arrives. Rachel signaled her own team. Defensive positions. Priority is protecting the asset and ensuring the intelligence gets out. She turned back to the escort leader. We fight together. Something like respect flickered across the woman's otherwise impassive features. As it should be. She removed her facial protection, revealing features similar to the ghost's, not identical, but carrying the same quality of purpose neutrality. I am Valkyrie. My team will take the outer perimeter. Yours should concentrate on this structure and immediate approaches. Rachel nodded, recognizing the tactical wisdom of the suggestion. Her team knew each other's movements and communication styles, as did Valkyrie's, Fighting as separate but coordinated units would maximize their effectiveness. As her operators moved to their assigned positions, Rachel found Sullivan beside her, checking his weapon with practiced hands that belied his evident unease. "Still think they're ghost stories, Commander?" he asked quietly. Rachel surveyed the mysterious operators preparing for combat with an efficiency that spoke of countless similar engagements. "I think we're about to find out exactly what they are." The first indication of the approaching threat came not as expected from the south, but from all directions, simultaneously, a coordinated attack designed to overwhelm the defenders through sheer force and surprise. Vehicles roared through the sandstorm, disgorging combatants who moved with the disciplined precision of special forces rather than insurgents. "Contact all sides," Martinez called out, already engaging targets from his position. The battle erupted with sudden violence, muzzle flashes illuminating the swirling sand, tracer rounds carving momentary paths through the storm before disappearing. Rachel coordinated her team's defense with calm precision, directing fields of fire and reinforcing positions as needed, while maintaining her own sector of responsibility. Through the chaos, she caught glimpses of Valkyrie's team engaging the attackers at the perimeter. What she witnessed defied conventional combat doctrine. They moved as if the laws of physics were merely suggestions, covering impossible distances in seconds, appearing where no human could have reached so quickly, engaging multiple targets with a precision that bordered on precognition rather than trained skill. One of the mysterious operators fell during the initial exchange, a lucky shot from one of the attackers finding a gap in otherwise perfect execution. Rachel expected the body to be recovered, as would be standard procedure in any military unit. Instead, she watched in stunned disbelief as the fallen operator's equipment and the body itself began to disintegrate before her eyes, turning to a fine dust that was immediately absorbed into the sandstorm. "Commander!" Chun's urgent call pulled her attention back to their immediate defense. "Southeast corner is being breached." Rachel redirected her focus to where 3 attackers had penetrated their defensive perimeter, moving with clear intent toward the hangar where Fallujah was protected. She engaged the nearest threat herself, a controlled double tap that dropped the attacker mid-stride, while Sullivan and Chun eliminated the remaining 2. But these were merely the first wave. More attackers pushed forward, using the storm and coordinated suppressive fire to mask their approach. Rachel recognized the tactics. These were no ordinary insurgents but highly trained operators, employing advanced small unit procedures. "They're pushing hardest from the south," she noted to Sullivan. "That's their main force. The rest are diversions." Sullivan nodded grimly. "Trying to draw us away from the asset." Classic multi-vector approach. Rachel recalibrated their defense accordingly, shifting resources to counter the main thrust while maintaining sufficient coverage against the diversionary attacks. It was a delicate balance, made more challenging by the deteriorating visibility as the sandstorm intensified further. Valkyrie appeared suddenly beside her, materializing from the swirling sand with no warning. Her uniform showed evidence of close combat, but her expression remained unnervingly calm. "Your extraction has been accelerated," she informed Rachel. "Arrival in 9 minutes at the northern edge of the airfield. You must begin moving the asset now." Rachel quickly assessed the tactical situation. Moving Fallujah would expose her to greater risk, but remaining in a fixed position against mounting opposition was ultimately more dangerous. "Sullivan, Walker, prepare the asset for immediate transport. Chun, Martinez, establish a fallback position halfway to the northern extraction point. The rest of you, maintain defensive fire to cover our movement." Valkyrie nodded in approval. "My remaining team will create a diversion to draw the main force away from your extraction route. Once initiated, you will have approximately 4 minutes to reach the northern edge before they realize the deception." "Understood." Rachel studied the mysterious woman, a question forming that she couldn't suppress. "Your operator who fell, What happened to them? Something like sorrow flickered across Valkyrie's otherwise impassive features. We do not leave our own to be studied or compromised. When we fall, we return to the elements, as all must eventually. Before Rachel could process this cryptic explanation, Valkyrie was gone, slipping back into the storm with the same uncanny speed with which she had appeared. Moments later, a series of explosions erupted from the southern perimeter, followed by intense weapons fire concentrated in that direction. "That's our cue," Rachel ordered. "Move now." Sullivan and Walker carefully transferred Farida to an improvised stretcher, the woman grimacing in pain but maintaining remarkable composure given her condition. The team formed a protective formation around her, while Rachel took point, leading them through a pre-planned route toward the northern extraction point. The diversion appeared to be working. Most of the attacking force had redirected toward the explosions and firefight at the southern perimeter. Still, Rachel maintained maximum vigilance, knowing that in combat, assumptions were often fatal. Her caution was validated when 3 attackers emerged from the swirling sand ahead, clearly a reserve element positioned to catch anyone attempting to flee northward. Rachel engaged the first threat immediately, her shots finding their mark despite the challenging conditions. Sullivan eliminated the second, but the third managed to take cover behind the wreckage of an old aircraft, returning fire with controlled bursts that forced the SEAL team to halt their advance. "Time is critical," Rachel assessed rapidly. "We can't get bogged down here." Without hesitation, she signaled Sullivan to cover her, then moved in a flanking maneuver that utilized the limited visibility to her advantage. The attacker, focused on suppressing the main group, never detected her approach until it was too late. The engagement was brief and decisive. With the immediate threat neutralized, the team resumed their movement toward the extraction point. Through her tactical display, Rachel could see they had less than 3 minutes until the estimated arrival of their aircraft, a deadline complicated by Farida's condition and the need to traverse approximately 200 meters of exposed terrain still ahead. They had covered half that distance when disaster struck. A hidden sniper, positioned with excellent fields of fire despite the storm, opened up on their formation. The first shot struck Rodriguez in the shoulder, spinning him backward but not penetrating his body armor. The second shot found a gap in Chun's protection, the impact driving him to his knees with a suppressed grunt of pain. "Sniper, 10 o'clock, elevated position," Sullivan called out, already returning fire toward the probable location. Rachel made an instant tactical assessment. They were pinned down with limited cover, an injured team member, and an extraction window rapidly closing. Standard procedure would be to establish a base of fire, then maneuver elements to eliminate the threat, but that would take time they didn't have. Sullivan, Walker, continue to the extraction point with Farida and Chun. The rest of us will suppress and follow. Sullivan's objection was immediate. "Commander, we don't leave our own." "This isn't about leaving anyone," Rachel countered, her voice carrying the absolute authority required in such moments. "It's about completing the mission. That intelligence must get out, Chief. You know the stakes." Before Sullivan could respond further, a new figure emerged from the storm beside them, the ghost herself, carrying the same energy of contained lethality that had marked her earlier appearance. "Your aircraft is 90 seconds out," she stated without preamble. "The sniper is already neutralized." As if to confirm her words, the suppressive fire that had pinned them down abruptly ceased. Rachel didn't waste time questioning how the ghost had eliminated a threat they hadn't even properly located yet. "Move, all of you." The ghost's command carried an authority that brooked no argument. "I will ensure your extraction succeeds." The team resumed their advance, supporting Chun between 2 operators while continuing to carry Farida. Rachel maintained her position at point, while the ghost moved alongside their formation like a silent guardian. As they approached the extraction point, The sound of rotor blades became audible through the storm, their aircraft arriving precisely as promised. The silhouette of a Black Hawk emerged from the swirling sand, touching down approximately 50 meters ahead. "Final push," Rachel ordered, knowing this was their most vulnerable moment, caught between cover and extraction, fully exposed to any remaining opposition. That opposition materialized seconds later, a final group of attackers emerging from the storm to the east, clearly intent on preventing their escape. Rachel and her remaining operators engaged immediately, providing covering fire as Sullivan and Walker rushed Fallujah and Chun toward the waiting helicopter. The Ghost moved with them, her attention seemingly divided between protecting the extraction and studying Rachel herself. As the first members of the team reached the aircraft, Rachel maintained her position, ensuring the withdrawal was covered. "Commander Westbrook," the Ghost spoke beside her, voice somehow carrying clearly despite the combined roar of the storm and helicopter. "Your mission will not end with this extraction. The corruption within your ranks goes deeper than these few names." Rachel fired a controlled burst at an attacker attempting to flank their position before responding. "What do you mean?" "There will come a time when you must choose between your oath to an institution and your commitment to what is right." The Ghost's expression remained impassive, but her words carried undeniable weight. "When that moment comes, remember why you serve." Before Rachel could demand clarification, the Ghost was moving, not toward the helicopter, but toward the remaining attackers. What followed was unlike anything Rachel had witnessed in over 2 decades of combat operations. The mysterious operator engaged multiple opponents simultaneously with a combination of firearms and hand-to-hand, techniques that seemed to defy the physical limitations of human capability. "Commander, we need to go, now." Sullivan's voice carried from the helicopter, where the rest of the team was already aboard. Rachel hesitated, watching as the Ghost systematically eliminated the final opposition. Their eyes met briefly across the battlefield, a moment of connection that transcended the chaos surrounding them. "Go." The Ghost's command was unmistakable even without being verbalized. "Complete your mission. Remember your why." Rachel made her decision, turning and sprinting for the aircraft. As she climbed aboard, she caught a final glimpse of the Ghost, standing motionless amid the fallen attackers, the sandstorm seeming to bend around her as if acknowledging a kindred force of nature. The Black Hawk lifted off, banking sharply away from the battlefield and climbing rapidly to escape both the storm and any potential pursuit. Inside, the team secured Fallujah and began emergency treatment for Chun, whose injury was serious but not immediately life-threatening. Rachel moved to the cockpit, confirming their flight plan with the pilots, a direct route to a secure medical facility where Fallujah could receive proper treatment, and her critical intelligence could be safely transmitted to trusted authorities. As she returned to the main compartment, Sullivan caught her eye, his expression a mixture of relief and lingering disbelief at what they had experienced. "I've been in this business a long time, Commander," he said, his voice pitched to reach only her ears. "Never seen anything like that. Never even heard of anything like that, and I've heard some tales." Rachel nodded, her gaze drawn to the swirling sandstorm now falling away beneath them. Somewhere down there, the Ghost and her mysterious team were either withdrawing or continuing their own incomprehensible mission. "The thing is," Sullivan continued, "the way they fought, the way they moved. That's not just training. That's something else entirely." "It doesn't matter what they are," Rachel replied, though the question would undoubtedly haunt her in the quiet hours to come. "What matters is why they fight, why they choose to intervene, why they judge some worthy of salvation and others not." Sullivan's weathered face grew thoughtful. "That's the real question, isn't it? What makes someone worthy in their eyes?" Rachel thought of the Ghost's penetrating gaze, the question she had asked both Fallujah and her brother. "Why do you serve?" "I think," Rachel said slowly, "it's about having the right reasons." about serving something greater than yourself, greater than orders or politics or personal gain. The helicopter continued its journey through skies now clearing as they left the sandstorm behind, carrying them towards safety and the completion of their mission. But as Rachel watched the desert recede below them, she knew with absolute certainty that her path had been irrevocably altered by this encounter. The ghost's final words echoed in her mind. There will come a time when you must choose between your oath to an institution and your commitment to what is right. Rachel Westbrook, 22-year veteran of Naval Special Warfare, commander of one of the most elite units in existence, found herself wondering not if that moment would come, but when and whether, when faced with that choice, she would prove worthy in the eyes of the ghost. 3 months after the Fallujah extraction, Rachel stood at the window of her temporary office at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, watching junior SEAL candidates endure the punishing surf conditioning that had begun her own journey 2 decades earlier. Each wave that crashed over the young men and women tested not just their physical stamina, but their psychological fortitude, the ability to endure when every instinct screamed for surrender. The parallel to her current situation wasn't lost on her. Behind her, spread across a secure terminal, was the evidence she'd spent the past 12 weeks meticulously gathering: financial records, communication logs, operational reports, all pointing to a network of corruption far more extensive than even Farida's intelligence had suggested. Not just the 4 officers originally named, but at least 9 more, extending into other branches and even certain civilian oversight positions. The intelligence Farida had provided had been just the beginning, the thread that, when pulled, began unraveling a tapestry of betrayal stretching back nearly a decade. Weapons shipments diverted, operations compromised, intelligence assets exposed, each revelation more damning than the last. Sullivan entered without knocking, a breach of protocol that had become common between them since Fallujah. The mission had forged something deeper than the usual commander-subordinate relationship, a shared secret that couldn't be properly documented in any after-action report. "They've called the meeting," he said without preamble. 0900 tomorrow, Pentagon Secure Conference Room Delta. Just the Joint Chiefs, Director Haynes from Intelligence, and Admiral Westergaard. Rachel nodded, mentally cataloging the names. 2 of the Joint Chiefs were clean. She had verified that personally. Haynes was an unknown quantity. And Westergaard, her direct superior, mentor, the man who had championed her career since she was a lieutenant, the man whose signature appeared on 3 of the questionable authorizations she had uncovered. "They're requesting all evidence be submitted for preliminary review before the meeting," Sullivan continued, his tone making clear what he thought of that request. "Of course they are." Rachel turned from the window, her expression resolute. "And our contingency?" Sullivan handed her a small encrypted drive. "Everything's arranged. Congressman Daniels and Senator Mercer are standing by, both Armed Services Committee, both with the clearance to receive this if necessary. And both clean, as far as we can determine." Rachel pocketed the drive, a backup plan she hoped wouldn't be necessary. The proper channels should work. The system should function as designed. But the ghost's warning had haunted her these past months, driving her to prepare for the possibility that institutional loyalty might ultimately conflict with moral obligation. "What about our team?" she asked. Sullivan's weathered face showed the strain of recent weeks. "They're ready, standing by for whatever comes next. You know they're with you, regardless of the cost." The cost, that was the crux of it, wasn't it? The potential cost of pursuing this investigation to its conclusion could be devastating, not just to her career, but to the institutions and individuals she had served faithfully for more than half her life. "Get some rest, Chief," she said finally. "Tomorrow will be decisive." After Sullivan left, Rachel returned to the window, though her focus had turned inward. The ghost's words echoed in her mind as they had countless times since Fallujah. your reasons matter. Why did she serve? The question had seemed straightforward once. Duty, patriotism, the desire to protect others. But recent months had forced a deeper examination, peeling away comfortable certainties to reveal more complex truths beneath. She served because of her father, who had returned from Vietnam with wounds both visible and invisible, yet still spoke of service as the highest calling. She served because of her first commanding officer, who taught her that true strength lay not in dominating others, but in defending those who couldn't defend themselves. She served because every time she had faced death, what flashed before her eyes wasn't her own life, but the faces of those who would live because of her actions. Her phone vibrated with an encrypted message, a final confirmation from her contact at Justice Department that the evidence package was sufficient for immediate indictments if the military chain of command failed to act. Another contingency, another bridge she hoped not to cross. The next morning dawned clear and bright. San Diego's perpetually perfect weather, a stark contrast to the storm gathering within the nation's military leadership. Rachel dressed with particular care, full dress uniform, every decoration and insignia precisely placed. If this was to be her final act as a naval officer, she would face it with the same attention to detail that had defined her service. Sullivan met her outside the Secure Communications Center, where their transport to Andrews Air Force Base awaited. His own uniform was similarly immaculate, his expression betraying nothing of the apprehension they both felt. "Final checks complete," he reported. "All files secured and backed up to 3 separate locations. Team is maintaining communication blackout as ordered." Rachel nodded, appreciating his thoroughness. They had spent weeks preparing for this moment, anticipating every possible attempt to suppress or discredit their evidence. The corruption they were confronting had tentacles reaching into multiple agencies and commands, opponents with the knowledge and resources to make evidence disappear. Witnesses recant, even make dedicated investigators doubt their own findings. The flight to Washington was uneventful, giving Rachel time to mentally rehearse her presentation and potential responses to challenges. She had faced enemy fire with less trepidation than she felt approaching this meeting. Physical courage had always come naturally to her. This moral courage, standing against her own chain of command, tested her in ways combat never had. They arrived at the Pentagon with 30 minutes to spare. As they cleared security and navigated the building's labyrinthine corridors, Rachel noticed Sullivan tense almost imperceptibly. "Chief?" she inquired quietly. 6 o'clock, blue suit with red tie, trying too hard to look casual, Sullivan murmured without turning his head. Rachel resisted the urge to look directly, instead using reflective surfaces to confirm Sullivan's observation. A man she didn't recognize was indeed following them, maintaining a careful distance while affecting an air of routine business. "Could be coincidence," she offered, though neither of them believed it. "Could be the Easter Bunny too, but I wouldn't bet my pension on it," Sullivan replied dryly. They continued toward the conference room, alert now for further surveillance. As they approached their destination, Admiral Westergaard emerged from a side corridor, his timing too precise to be accidental. "Commander Westbrook," he greeted her, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "A word before the meeting?" It wasn't really a request. Rachel nodded to Sullivan, who continued toward the conference room with evident reluctance, while she followed the Admiral into a small anteroom. Westergaard closed the door and activated the room's anti-surveillance system before turning to face her. At 62, he remained imposing, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that commanded attention any gathering. For 20 years, he had been her mentor, champion, and occasional critic. The possibility of his involvement in what she had uncovered felt like a personal betrayal beyond the professional one. "This investigation of yours has created quite a stir, Rachel," he began, using her first name as he always did in private. "Accusations against decorated officers, some with 30-plus years of service. Allegations that could damage the Navy's reputation irreparably if handled improperly. Rachel maintained a neutral expression. The evidence speaks for itself, Admiral. Evidence can be interpreted in multiple ways, Westergaard countered smoothly. Context matters. National security considerations sometimes require compartmentalization that might appear suspicious to those without full clearance. With respect, sir, misappropriated weapons shipments and compromised operations resulting in American casualties aren't matters of interpretation. Rachel's tone remained professional despite her growing certainty that Westergaard was involved. They're criminal acts. The Admiral's expression hardened slightly. This meeting today, it doesn't have to be adversarial. There are opportunities here, paths forward that could address legitimate concerns while preventing unnecessary damage to the service. What exactly are you suggesting, Admiral? Rachel asked, though she already knew the answer. A more targeted investigation. Focus on the clearest cases, the 4 officers from the initial intelligence. Allow internal processes to handle the rest, away from potential public scrutiny. He placed a hand on her shoulder, paternal and manipulative simultaneously. Your career has such promise, Rachel. Command of Special Operations Group is opening next year. With my recommendation, it would be yours. And there it was, the bribe thinly disguised as mentorship. Abandon the wider investigation, accept a promotion, allow the systemic corruption to continue with only token sacrifices to appease appearances. In that moment, the ghost's prediction came true. Rachel found herself exactly where the mysterious operator had warned, forced to choose between institutional loyalty and moral obligation. Her response was measured, every word carefully chosen. I appreciate your concern for my career, Admiral, and for the reputation of the service we both love. But my duty is to the oath I took, to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That oath doesn't come with exceptions for convenience or career advancement. Something cold flickered across Westergaard's features, a glimpse of the calculation behind the mentor's mask. You're making a mistake, Commander. One that cannot be undone. Perhaps, sir. Rachel straightened, meeting his gaze directly. But it's my mistake to make. She turned and left the room without waiting for dismissal. A technical breach of protocol that seemed insignificant compared to the larger principles at stake. Sullivan was waiting outside, his posture alert, eyes tracking movement throughout the corridor. That bad? He asked quietly as they resumed their walk to the conference room. Worse, Rachel replied. He's involved, no question. Offered me Special Operations Group command to narrow the investigation. Sullivan's jaw tightened. And our contingency plans? Prepare to execute immediately after the meeting. Rachel's decision was made. Regardless of the outcome in there, we go external today. The conference room fell silent as Rachel completed her presentation. For 45 minutes, she had methodically outlined the evidence, financial records showing patterns of suspicious transfers, operational reports with critical details altered after submission, communication logs revealing unauthorized contact with known hostile entities. The faces around the table reflected varying degrees of shock, skepticism, and carefully controlled anger. 2 of the Joint Chiefs appeared genuinely appalled. Another studied his notes with suspicious intensity, avoiding eye contact. Director Haynes maintained professional neutrality, though his questions had been incisive and focused on verification methodologies rather than attempting to discredit. Admiral Westergaard had remained silent throughout, his expression unreadable. General Michaels, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, spoke first after the presentation concluded. These allegations are extraordinary, Commander. The implications, if proven, represent perhaps the most significant breach of trust in modern military history. They are not merely allegations, sir, Rachel corrected respectfully but firmly. The evidence has been independently verified by 3 separate intelligence analysts. Financial records have been authenticated by forensic accountants. Operational discrepancies have been confirmed through original field reports compared against official submissions. Yet you've conducted this investigation without proper authorization, Admiral Westergaard interjected, his tone reasonable but his intent clear, to undermine her credibility and the legitimacy of her findings. With respect, Admiral, the investigation was initiated following standard protocols for counterintelligence concerns based on actionable intelligence received during the Fallujah extraction. Rachel had anticipated this attack. When the scope of potential compromise became apparent, I followed Directive 5240-06, which explicitly authorizes continued investigation when there is credible evidence of serious security breaches. Director Haynes leaned forward slightly. The technical and operational aspects of your evidence appear sound, Commander. But the motivations you're attributing to these officers, financial gain, ideological sympathy with insurgent causes, these require stronger substantiation. The financial trails are documented in Section 4 of your briefing materials. Director, Sullivan interjected, indicating the relevant files. Offshore accounts, shell companies, transfers coinciding precisely with compromised operations. As for ideology, we have recovered communications, discussing necessary rebalancing of global power and correcting historical Western overreach. Language, consistent with the rhetoric of the hostile entities they were contacting. The discussion continued for another hour, probing questions, challenges to specific pieces of evidence, debates about jurisdictional authority and proper investigative channels. Throughout, Rachel maintained the same calm professionalism that had characterized her operational leadership, neither defensive nor aggressive, simply committed to the facts and their implications. Finally, General Michaels called for a brief recess to confer privately with the other Joint Chiefs. As the room cleared temporarily, Rachel and Sullivan remained at their positions, maintaining custody of their evidence materials as protocol required. "They're split," Sullivan observed quietly. Michaels and Torres seemed genuinely concerned. "The others are either compromised or afraid of the fallout." Rachel nodded slightly, having reached the same assessment. "Prepare for immediate execution of contingency the moment we leave this room, regardless of their decision." When the senior officers returned, their divided opinions were evident in their expressions. General Michaels spoke for the group, his tone formally neutral, but with an undercurrent of suppressed anger. "The Joint Chiefs acknowledge receipt of your evidence, Commander Westbrook. A special investigative committee will be formed to further evaluate these materials and determine appropriate actions. In the meantime, all information presented today is classified at the highest level. No discussion of these matters is authorized outside this room without explicit approval from this office." Rachel recognized the statement for what it was, not a rejection, but an attempt to control and potentially limit the investigation, to bury it in committees and classification restrictions until it could be safely defanged. "I understand, sir," she replied, gathering her materials. "Will that be all?" "For now, Commander." Michael's eyes held a warning. "You've done your duty bringing this forward. The proper authorities will take it from here." As Rachel and Sullivan departed the Pentagon 30 minutes later, having properly secured all materials as required by protocol, neither spoke until they were well away from the building. Even then, they were cautious, aware of potential surveillance. "Initial assessment?" Sullivan asked as their transport navigated through Washington traffic. "Exactly as expected," Rachel replied. "They'll form a committee, classify everything beyond reach, investigate selectively, and ultimately find procedural errors rather than criminal conspiracy." Sullivan nodded grimly. "And our next move?" Rachel checked her watch. The encrypted file should have reached Congressman Daniels and Senator Mercer 10 minutes ago, automatically triggered when we exited Pentagon grounds without sending the abort code. Justice Department and FBI counterintelligence received copies simultaneously. "There's no coming back from this," Sullivan said quietly. "Not a warning, but a simple statement of fact." Career-wise, Rachel smiled slightly, a genuine expression despite the circumstances. "There are worse things than ending a career, Chief, like continuing one at the expense of your soul." The fallout came swiftly, as they had anticipated. By that evening, their security clearances were suspended pending review of unauthorized disclosure of classified materials. By morning, they were formally relieved of duty and ordered to surrender all government-issued equipment and credentials. But the evidence couldn't be contained. Within 48 hours, the FBI had executed search warrants against 2 of the named officers. Within a week, congressional hearings were announced. Within 2 weeks, the first indictments were filed. Rachel watched these developments from temporary quarters at a San Diego hotel, effectively isolated from her former command, but receiving updates through carefully established back channels. Sullivan remained by her side, as did most of her former team, all now facing uncertain professional futures for their roles in supporting the investigation. 1 month after the Pentagon meeting, as the scope of the conspiracy continued to unfold in congressional testimony and criminal proceedings, Rachel sat alone on the hotel balcony, watching the sun set over the Pacific. The same ocean she had crossed countless times on missions whose true purposes she was only now beginning to question. A knock at the door interrupted her contemplation. Expecting Sullivan with their nightly security update, she was surprised to find the hallway empty when she checked through the peephole. Only after opening the door did she notice the small package on the floor, a plain envelope with no markings. Inside was a single item, a silver hourglass emblem identical to the one worn by the ghost and her team, attached to a note with just 3 words, "You chose correctly." Rachel studied the emblem, turning it over in her hands. Not standard silver, she realized, but something else, a metal she couldn't identify, with unusual weight and texture. As she examined it, the surface seemed to shift slightly, catching the light in ways that defied normal reflection patterns. Another knock came, this time followed by Sullivan's familiar voice. Rachel quickly pocketed the emblem before letting him in. "You need to see this," he said without greeting, activating the room's television and tuning to a news channel where a press conference was underway. Admiral Westergaard stood at the podium, his usual commanding presence diminished by the circumstances. Behind him, federal agents waited with barely concealed impatience. As Rachel watched, he finished reading a prepared statement, then surrendered himself to custody. 3 more indictments this afternoon, Sullivan reported, including Westergaard. The whole network is unraveling. Rachel felt no satisfaction, only a complex mixture of vindication and regret, for the necessity of the action she had taken, for the damage to institutions she respected despite their flaws, for the mentor who had ultimately betrayed the very principles he had taught her to uphold. "There's something else," Sullivan continued, his expression uncharacteristically uncertain. "A job offer. For both of us, actually. From a private foundation involved in international security. Very exclusive, very well funded. The kind of operation that might allow people with our particular skill sets to continue making a difference outside traditional channels." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "What foundation?" "That's the interesting part," Sullivan replied, handing her a business card embossed with a familiar symbol, an hourglass. "They call themselves the Worthy. No public profile, no web presence, but connections at the highest levels. The contact person suggested they've had their eye on us for some time." Rachel felt the weight of the metal emblem in her pocket, a perfect match to the symbol on the card. The Ghost's organization, reaching out now that she had passed their test. Now that she had proven herself worthy by their standards. "What do you think?" Sullivan asked when she remained silent. Rachel considered the question carefully. The traditional path of her career was effectively over, Even if eventually cleared of wrongdoing, the political realities meant she would never again advance within the system she had challenged. Yet her drive to serve, to protect, to make a meaningful difference remained undiminished. "I think," she said finally, "that sometimes the most important missions don't come with official orders." 3 days later, Rachel stood on a private airfield, watching as a sleek, unmarked aircraft taxied toward them. Sullivan waited beside her, along with 4 former team members who had chosen to follow her into this new chapter. The others had made different choices, some returning to conventional service, others pursuing civilian lives, and she respected their decisions. Worthiness, she had come to believe, took many forms. As the aircraft door opened, Rachel wasn't surprised to see the ghost herself descending the steps, still carrying that same aura of controlled power that had been so evident in Fallujah. "Commander Westbrook," she greeted Rachel, her expression as neutral as ever, but perhaps with the faintest suggestion of approval. "Or simply Rachel now, I suppose." "Simply Rachel is fine," she confirmed. "Though I'm curious what I'll be called in your organization." The ghost's lips curved in that same almost smile from their first encounter. "Among us, names are earned rather than assigned. For now you are a candidate, as are your companions. What you become will depend on what you bring to our work." "And what exactly is that work?" Sullivan asked, his natural caution still evident despite his decision to join. "We serve where traditional forces cannot or will not," the ghost replied. "We protect those worthy of protection. We stand against those who abuse power regardless of their flags or titles. We maintain balance in a world where official channels are often compromised by politics, greed, or ideology." It wasn't a complete answer, but Rachel hadn't expected one. Trust, like names, would be earned over time. "Before we board," the ghost continued, "I have one question, the same one I ask all who join our ranks. Why do you serve?" Rachel met her gaze directly, understanding now that this was not merely a question but a declaration of personal truth, the core motivation that would define her place in whatever came next. "I serve to protect those who cannot protect themselves," she answered. "Not for nations or ideologies, but for the fundamental principle that power exists to defend the vulnerable, not to exploit them. I serve because in a world of shifting loyalties and convenient truths, someone must stand for what is right, regardless of personal cost." The ghost studied her for a long moment, then nodded once, a gesture of acceptance that carried more weight than any formal commission. "Welcome to the worthy," she said simply, turning toward the waiting aircraft. As Rachel followed, she felt the familiar pre-mission tension, that combination of uncertainty and purpose that had accompanied every significant operation of her career. But beneath it was something new, the sense that after 22 years of service, she was finally aligning her actions fully with her deepest values, without compromise or constraint. Whatever challenges awaited with this mysterious organization, whatever operations they would undertake beyond the boundaries of conventional authority, she would face them with the same commitment that had defined her military service, but now answering to a higher standard than any chain of command could impose. She was no longer Commander Rachel Westbrook of Naval Special Warfare. She was simply Rachel of the Worthy, her true service just beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.